Hi, thanks for joining us for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. I'm Chris Cooper. The growing season is over, but today we're going to talk about some great shrub and flower options you can try out. Also, fruit trees are losing their leaves, but there are some things you can do to prepare them for next year. That's just ahead on the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South.
Production funding for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South is provided by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the Family Plot. I'm Chris Cooper. Joining me today is Joellen Diamond. Joellen is the Director of Landscape at the University of Memphis. And Mr. D is here.
Howdy.
Thanks for joining us. Hi, Ms. Joellen. Let's talk about some shrubs that folks should try out. So let's start with viburnum, because I know you like viburnums, right?
Yeah, I like viburnums. And viburnums are actually a fairly common shrub.
Okay.
But a lot of people don't know about them. The reason why they're not more popular is because most of them are very large.
Okay.
And so it's kind of hard to put, people want foundation plants and things that are small. Well, but sometimes it takes a large shrub, in the back corner of your lot or somewhere. And viburnums would be an excellent addition. There are all different kinds. There's one thing that's true about viburnums, that they're not all alike. As related as they are, they can be trees, shrubs. They can be evergreen. They can be semi-evergreen.
My goodness.
They can be deciduous.
Look at Mr. D. He's like, wow. Yeah, I'm with you on that, Mr. D.
And they can be large, up to 60 feet tall, and they can be short to 3 feet.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean,
It's quite a range.
There's a huge range of viburnums. So, consequently, there's probably one that'll fit your situation, no matter what you're looking for. And we'll talk about a few of them.
Okay.
But first, the things that they have in common. They all have white or pink flowers, and they bloom in the spring.
Okay.
They all have red fruit that turns to purple if the birds don't eat it first. So it's a good shrub for birds if you want to feed birds, so it's good for that. Some of the smaller varieties, though, don't always have berries in flowers.
Okay.
I don't know exactly why, but sometimes it's not reliable for flowering in berries on some of the smaller varieties.
Okay.
They like full sun. They like light shade, and they can grow in some pretty dark shade, but they probably won't bloom, and they probably won't have berries.
Right, makes sense.
And they won't grow a whole lot, so they won't get huge in shade. One of the best things about them, though, is they are very tolerant of soils in general.
Oh, that's a good thing.
That's good for us here in the Mid-South, because we don't have the greatest soils for air and water movement.
Okay.
Because it's such a tight soil. But one thing they don't like is wet feet. So they don't like the roots to stay wet. So you can't put them in an area that holds water. So you have that problem. You got to raise them up because they don't want to have wet feet.
Okay.
But other than that, they're not particular. Which is really good.
Can you handle that, Mr. D?
You sound pretty temperamental to me. I tell you.
Well, let's talk about some varieties. There's one called Viburnum davidi, or David viburnum. It's the smallest one. It's about 3 feet tall. Oh, okay. And it's fairly common in the trade. You see it in garden centers occasionally here and there. Okay. It will be good for a foundation plant because it doesn't get very big. Mm-hmm. Well,
evergreen?
It's evergreen. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that one is evergreen. The next one I'm going to talk about, the Viburnum carlesi, was the first viburnum that I fell in love with. But it is deciduous. It loses its leaves.
Okay.
But look at all you get, besides the wood in the winter, which is interesting. And it is a fairly large shrub. We're talking maybe up to 8 feet or so. So it's a
pretty good size.
Big size shrub. But in the spring, it blooms, and it has round spheres of blooms that are white and pinkish and fragrant. So can you imagine that large shrub with fragrance? And you can smell it ways away. So that's why I had fallen in love with it. And it has gorgeous green foliage in the summertime. And then in the fall, it has nice fall color.
Even
So I
better.
mean, it really is a very versatile plant, but it's big and it likes sun, so you got to give it some sun for all
Okay.
that nice, wonderful blooms.
Makes sense.
So that's one. And then there's one that is also grown for its bloom and its fruiting. It's the double file viburnum,
I've seen those.
Viburnum plicatum tomentosum. And it's got horizontal branching, and the flowers stand up along the top of the stem. They're lace caps along the top of the stem. And then those turn into red berries. And so they're
Yeah, those are
very,
pretty. I've
very
seen those.
pretty and very popular. They are large too. So, I mean, you're going to give them about 8-10 feet. So, you know, these are not small shrubs. And then there is the one viburnum, and it's a hybrid. Viburnum retidophyloides.
All right.
It's a leatherleaf viburnum, and that's what I have in my yard, which is this one here. And as you can see, it's like a leather leaf. It's very substantial. And this particular one blooms, pretty white blooms in the spring, and then it's semi-deciduous. So what it is the leaves will turn purple color, and they'll kind of cling unless it gets really, really cold, and then sometimes some of them will fall off, but it'll still have some clinging to it. And you know, you can see in ice storms and stuff, the
leaves are
the
pretty,
leaves
though.
are still
little
there
puckered.
and growing.
I don't see any sign of insect or disease.
This
there.
is, I have
right.
never had any problem with this viburnum. I don't know of any problems they have other than keeping their roots dry, that, you know, because they don't like wet feet.
Sure.
So other than that, I've seen no problems with these, which is why I don't understand why they're not so popular. But, you
Almost
know,
looks like a little tobacco plant.
The leaves do look a lot.
well, if you
Quite
feel
like
it,
that.
they're real leather, and across there's little spines on these too.
That may be
And
why insects don't bother it.
Maybe
Probably.
that, and you know, I don't think deer eat this particular one because it's just so spiny. And if you handle
you know,
it,
you mentioned earlier about if you handle it.
you
can get
handle
something
it.
on
You don't want to rub your eyes
All right.
because it's these little, everything they have on them is just real fuzzy, and they can be sharp and irritating. But it's a beautiful plant. It grows. It's nice, stiff. The large leaves make a nice texture difference in the landscape, and I really like it.
All right. So, Joellen, let's talk about asters.
Asters.
Yeah.
Large family of asters, and not only in the United States, but across Eurasia and Europe.
Okay.
So it's a large family. They have done a lot of scientific research on asters because they are so popular. And they have found out that they are different. So the botanists have reclassified the asters and grouped them into the kinds of, you know, scientifically DNA tested ones that are
goodness.
more related to each other. And so that's made it even more confusing for you. But most of the popular ones that you see in garden centers today are a certain type called Symphotictrichum nova belgii.
Wow.
And I
It's a
think
mouthful.
it's a huge mouthful, but it's an aster that has been, they've taken some of the European and some of the American asters, and they've hybridized them, and that's what you see mostly in the garden centers.
Okay.
And they are beautiful. And the pictures that you have of asters don't do them justice because they come in ranges of white, there's a creamy yellow, and then all the colors of blues, purples, pinks, magentas that you can think of, and they're just very vibrant because they are blooming in the fall this time of year. And I've had mine bloom clear up until December.
Wow.
It just depends on the weather.
Okay.
But they are very good in the wild. You can find seed catalogs that have native asters in them that you can, of course, they're not going to be called, they may be called asters, but they are going to be of one of these different, you know, classifications of genuses now. But they are asters. In fact, if you take a walk out in the woods and you see something blooming this time of year, usually white, sometimes a little bit on the lavender side, it's going to be an aster.
Okay. What kind of conditions? Best growing.
Of course, they like a lot of sun. but they can take some partly sunny, partly shady areas. But they won't bloom as much, and they'll get long and leggy and fall over. But because they like sun, asters like to be in the sun. They liked well-drained soil, and that's a little bit of the problem we have here. You got to make sure. I've bought them and I've planted them. I've kept them for years, but they do like to have well-drained soil.
Okay. Now, usually when I think about asters, I think about the weed aster that I have in my Bermuda lawn.
Yeah, well, but he's native.
He's native.
So
Okay.
it's a wild.
And I actually let him stay.
You can let him
'cause he looks
stay.
good
It
in
gives
my
you
yard.
some color.
Get some color, Mr. D.
Color would.
Yeah,
There you go.
back off that lawnmower.
Yeah, I do.
The bees will come and visit it, and anyway, but the one that I have that seems to do very well here in the Mid-South is the fragrant aster, and that's this one here. And it's a blue color, and it's got a woody stem, as you can see. And what happens when you crush the leaves, there's an aroma to them, and that's where it gets its name.
Okay.
And you can see some of these with the yellow parts, the yellow centers. They are the newer ones. Those are the ones the bees go to. And then when they get older, they turn kind of a purple inside.
Those are pretty.
And it's a real pretty blue, and there's lots of them out there. And all these asters are clump forming. So when you divide them, probably divide them in the spring because they're blooming in the fall. You don't want to disturb them when they're blooming. Okay. And they will live for a long time, and you can pass them along.
All right, well, thanks. We appreciate that information. I think Mr. D even likes that. Thank you much.
When you talk about a species versus a genus, when you look at the classification of a plant, it starts out in the kingdom and the phyla, and it goes all the way down, to the exact species, which is a two-part name. Now, the genus is the first part of that name. For example, Magnolia grandiflora.
Okay.
And see, magnolia you can talk about magnolias inclusively to mean star magnolias, southern magnolias, saucer magnolias. If you just say magnolia, you're saying the whole genus of all of those different species. The species is that two-part name. For example, Magnolia grandiflora. You know exactly that that's our southern magnolia. If you said Magnolia stellata, that's our star magnolia, and so on down we go. And the genus just happens to be also the common name.
All right, Mr. D, fall fruit tree care. What do we need to know?
Well, probably one of the best things to do, right now in the fall of the year is to clean up under your fruit trees. Get rid of any rotten fruit or mummified fruit, and leaves, branches that could possibly be infected with diseases, or if you had a problem with fire blight. We had a lot of fire blight pressure this year with all the rain that we had. You want to get all of those leaves and everything out of the orchard if you can, or out from under the trees, and don't put it in your compost bin. I would get rid of it, either have a bonfire and burn it up, or if you can legally do that, or double bag it and put it in the garbage. But that's one of the best things that you can do right now. Another thing that very soon you can do is start thinking about applying your dormant oil sprays, liquid lime sulfur, in some cases fixed copper. These are some applications that you can put out during the dormant period that will help control some of the insect. It's a preventative treatment for insects next year. Insects, some will overwinter as eggs, or even sometimes adults in bark crevices and things like that. And these treatments will help take care of some of these problems. Let me kind of go down a list of what some of the products do, what some of the problems that they control. The dormant oil can be applied anytime the trees are dormant, when all the leaves are off, November through March. You definitely need to make sure you make at least one application just before bud break in the springtime, though, late winter. You need to follow the label directions on temperature restrictions. Temperatures, if it's a real cold freeze coming, that can create a problem. Okay. So you need to apply it when the temperatures. If you put it out when the temperatures are below 35 degrees, you might damage the bark. But the dormant oil will control aphids, scales, spider mites, and many other insects by desiccating or smothering the eggs and larvae. Sure. So that's what your dormant oil will do. Lime sulfur is more for fungal diseases and bacterial diseases. So if you've had a problem with fire blight, scab, bacterial blights, and anthracnose, lime sulfur is the product that you need to do, and probably 2 or 3 applications over the winter time, early in the winter, middle of the winter, and then late winter. Okay. Would be a good idea on lime sulfur.
Any temperature requirements for the lime sulfur?
Don't see anything on that. Fixed copper controls canker, a fungal disease, and you may want to make a couple of applications of that if you've had a problem with canker, primarily on peaches and plums in our area. But if you don't have peaches and plum trees, then you don't have to worry about the fixed copper. Let
me ask you about this though, going back to the fixed copper and the lime sulfur. Do you do one or the other, or you do them both?
It's best to do them both.
Both? Okay.
If you have peaches and plums. Now, of course, the copper is only for peaches and plums. The liquid lime sulfur, that would be on all of them. Okay. Apples, pears, peaches, plums, nectarines.
But you wouldn't mix the two together, would you? Or would they have to be separate applications?
That's a very good question. I don't really see a reason why you wouldn't mix those together. Okay. I would see why you wouldn't want to mix them with a dormant oil. Yeah. Because you might affect the consistency of the dormant oil. But I really don't see a problem with mixing the fixed copper with liquid lime sulfur. Okay. I don't see a problem with doing that. And that would reduce the number of times you're out there spraying.
Right, it sure would.
50%.
It sure would.
Yeah. One thing that you see a lot of fruit growers do is they'll paint the base of their tree with white latex paint.
I've seen that.
And what you're trying to do is to avoid freeze injury, avoid on the southwest side of that plant. Even any time during the wintertime, if it's real cold and it thaws, the sun thaws the cambium layer or the bark, and then it refreezes that night, it can cause that bark to split. Right. And mixing just white latex paint on, mix it with water, cut it 50%, 1 part paint, 1 part water, and then you paint the trunk, and that will act as a sunscreen, and basically repel the sunlight and keep that from happening. And you can, the commercial growers I've known will put a rubber glove on and then a cotton glove and just put their hand in the paint and just go up 20, 30 inches. You don't have to go all, you don't want to paint the whole tree. Sure. But especially the lower part of that tree would be a good idea to do that. Okay. Also now is the time to be thinking about ordering and replacing fruit trees. I lost an apple tree this year, and what happened is I planted it in a little bit lower place than the other apple trees, and over time soil had washed in around that apple tree, and as much as I preach against planting trees too deep, that tree actually soil settled in around it, and I got a windstorm. I noticed the foliage was much lighter than the rest of my fruit trees, and we got a little windstorm and it just blew the tree over.
How about that?
And I looked at it and it was actually planted too deep. Wow. Or it wasn't planted too deep, but soil washed in around it, and the same thing took place. So that's
good to mention.
One thing you need to really be careful with. Okay. But think about going in order. You can order them from reputable nurseries and pick out your varieties and go ahead soil test. Yeah. If you're going to plant any, and make sure you get the pH right. pH needs to be pretty high for almost all fruits except for blueberries. And and if you're going to plant blueberries, you need to get the pH down. Right. Make it acid enough to burn the soles off the bottom of your shoes. Pretty much 4.2 to 5.2 pH. Very low pH.
All right, Mr. D, we appreciate that good information.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
We've got some vinca and marigolds that we planted last year in this container with our rosemary and our parsley. They have reseeded and have come up again, so rather than let them sit down there, we're going to dig them up and put them back in our container so we'll have flowers up here. And we're going to dig up this marigold first. As you see, the stick fell down and it rooted all the way across the stem. So we'll have a lot of nice roots to add to the container here. Then we'll dig up the vinca. There we go. And we're just planting the roots. We're not trying to bury the stem. Now that we have finished planting, don't forget to water them. Now the container has flowers again.
All right, so Q&A session. Y'all ready for these questions?
Sure.
Good questions, good questions. All right, let's start with the first viewer email. Can you identify this flower? And this is from Miss Sandy. So, Miss Joellen, do we know what that flower is?
After some research, yeah.
Okay.
Gentiana, I guess is how you pronounce it.
That's the way I pronounce it.
And it's pretty. It blooms this time of year in the fall, which is probably why she's wondering, she's seen it out and she wants to know what it is.
Right.
And she's put it in her garden and it's native, but it is found in the wild, but we're about at the southern end of its native area, Zone 7. So yeah, I'm surprised she actually found it out.
Right, it is a herbaceous perennial. I did talk to Miss Sandy. She told me she was out walking her dogs in the woods.
Where does she
outside
live?
of Bartlett.
Okay.
And she happened across this beautiful plant. She dug it up, brought it home, put it in her landscape, and wanted to know, what is it?
Yeah.
Right.
And that's how most, hybrid plants and plants get in neighborhoods, because you find it out and you bring it in and they hybridize them. And the fact that it's blooming this time of year should make it start to be very popular.
Right, it should.
Plant.
It should. And of course, conditions, rich, cool, moist, well-drained, acidic soils.
That's true.
Right?
You get, but there's a lot of landscapes that fit that description. We just got to replicate what was found in nature, where it was
Right.
found in nature,
All right,
and we can grow it.
we can grow it. So there you have it, Miss Sandy Gentiana, right?
Gentiana.
Gentiana. All right, here's our next viewer email. Should I prune my gardenia before I cover it for the winter? My grandfather did that, and his were always so healthy looking. My bush is tall, but not too full. I thought maybe it would increase the branches in the spring. Am I wrong? And this is from Miss Edwina. So she wants to prune her gardenia before she covers it for the winter.
I don't think that would be a very good idea, since gardenias normally bloom on the second year growth. So she's cutting off the blooms for next year if she trims it. You're supposed to trim plants, flowers, and shrubs that bloom right after they finish blooming. So then they have time to grow and produce flowers for next year. My parents had one and it kept dying down every year, and my mother loves gardenias, so they dug it up, put it in a pot, and they rolled it in and out of the garage.
Smart.
I mean, and they had beautiful shrubs. There are hardy varieties, hardy gardenias now, and they're smaller. They're much smaller varieties than the older ones that are huge. So she might want to try one of those, but I understand it's not thick as she wants it, but maybe next year, after it finishes blooming, she should trim it and fertilize it and make sure it gets enough nutrients. And I don't know how much light it's getting. They need quite a bit of light to be able to produce all that nice green foliage and blooms.
Okay. Anything to add to that, Mr. D?
Just, I don't know of anything that needs to be pruned this time of the year, really. This is normally, your pruning shears need to be oiled and greased and sitting up on the shelf waiting for late winter. They don't need, you need to put them up.
Right.
I just don't know of anything that does well unless you're trying to kill something. If you want to kill something, prune it now.
Prune it.
Prune it now.
Got
And
that right.
stress it really good before it goes into the winter, and maybe you'll kill it. And some things you want to try to kill. Kudzu.
Yeah.
Now is a really good time to
this is
prune kudzu if you want to kill kudzu.
This is true.
Japanese privet?
Uh-huh.
Japanese
Privet?
privet?
Yeah. Anything you want to kill now is a good time. It'll really stress it.
Yeah, but we don't want to stress that gardenia miss that winter.
No, we
So
don't.
there you have it from Miss Joellen. All right. But I do have another question for that. Okay. Say she doesn't prune it. Do gardenias need to be covered up for the winter?
Well, yes and no. It
Okay.
depends on what kind she has.
Ah, okay.
And if she normally covers it, I don't know where she's at
Yeah.
in the part of the country, but maybe it is that she needs to cover it
Okay.
up. If she's not digging it up and putting it inside, it's one of those that could, is hurt by the really cold temperatures and not one of the hardy ones, then maybe it
okay.
does need to be.
Miss Edwina
Covered
may be from Buffalo, New York. Who knows?
Yeah, so
Don't
we
never
know, right? All right, thanks for that question, Miss Edwina. All right, so Mr. D, Mr. Joellen, we out of time. That was fun. We out of time. Thank you. Remember, we love to hear from you. Send us an email or letter. The email address is familyplot@wkno.org, and the mailing address is Family Plot, 7151 Cherry Farms Road, Cordova, Tennessee 38016. Or you can go online to familyplotgarden.com. That's all we have time for today. To get a jump on next year's season, head on over to familyplotgarden.com. We have hundreds of videos on all sorts of gardening topics. I'm Chris Cooper. Be sure to join us next week for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. Be safe.